Okay, it's 6:30. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Rushcliffe Borough Council Planning Committee. This has been transmitted on YouTube, both live and also it will be available to watch later as well. For the benefit of people who may be watching the meeting, my name is Councillor Richard Butler. I'm the chairman of the Planning Committee, and with me or with us in the committee this evening our fellow councillors, Councillor Clark, Councillor Goland, Councillor Healy, Councillor Major, Councillor Mason, Councillor Murray, Councillor Mrs Stockwood, who is the Vice Chairman of the committee, Councillor John Stockwood, Councillor Thomas and Councillor Verdi. So, good evening to you. And officers in the meeting tonight is Mr Pegram, who is the Service Manager for Communities, and Mrs Sells, who is the Borough Solicitor. So welcome everybody. I was just thinking to myself, for those of us who were on the committee this time last year, it was this meeting, the equivalent of this meeting last year, where we turned up at the arena and it was absolutely torrential rain and people were getting stuck in floods all over the place, and it was all quite dramatic. So hopefully we haven't got the rain tonight, but where time goes, it's amazing. So into the agenda, and the first item is any apologies for absence and substitute members, please.
Apologies from Councillor Purdue-Horan. Substitute is Councillor John Stockwood.
Thank you, and welcome Councillor Stockwood again. It's quite habit forming. And do we have any declarations of interest under the Code of Conduct and or under the Planning Code? Anyone wish to declare anything? No, I think not. Thank you. So we'll go on to item 3, which is the minutes of the meeting held, the planning meeting held on the 8th of October, which you've got. Now, we do need to explain something on these minutes. We need to make a slight amendment to them, and I think Mr Pegram is going to explain that to us, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Chairman, it's in respect of the application for overgrown acres. Members will recall that during the debate there was a question over the number of people that would attend events, and in particular the maximum number of people that would attend. Condition 12 of the recommendation required noise monitoring to be carried out, including 3 events when the maximum number of people were in attendance. Clearly, given the fact that there could be variance in numbers, officers didn't consider that condition was precise enough, which is one of the tests that conditions have to meet. I therefore sought clarification from the Environmental Health Officer what the purpose of that condition was, and it's to validate the predictions in the noise assessment. And the noise assessment was carried out for a specified number of people, which I think was 128. Hence, Chairman, you'll see that the condition was reworded with your agreement after the meeting to make reference to a specified number of guests which must be present when they are carrying out at least 3 monitoring exercises. It's really just to draw that to members' attention, that change, because it clearly differs from what was in the agenda. But as I say, it was agreed with yourself after the meeting. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr Pegram. I hope that's clear.
With that slight amendment, are we all, those of us who are here, are we happy to accept the minutes as being correct? Well, I take it there's no one against, so happy with that. Okay, thank you very much. Right, so we'll now go on to the main items of tonight's agenda, which are tonight's planning applications. We have 3 applications to discuss, and the first one on the agenda, well, actually, before I come to that, I just need to check, has everybody received the various set of late representations that relating to the applications tonight, because this is one of them. So thank you for confirming that. So the first application tonight is 173 Loughborough Road, West Bridgford, and this is a change of use from dental surgery use class D1 to a place of worship for use class D1 as well. And Mr. Pegram, I think you just need to explain to us about the late representation relating to this, and also a procedural matter that I'm sure we've all read, but for the benefit of anyone watching the meeting or listening to the meeting, it would be helpful to clarify, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, since we published the agenda, we were given notice by the applicant that they had lodged an appeal against non-determination of the application. The 8-week period for this application expired on the 22nd of October. There was no explicit agreement or rejection of an extension of time, so we carried on and put this on the agenda. However, because it's outside the 8 weeks, the applicant has the right to appeal non-determination. On that basis, Chairman, the jurisdiction over the application transfers from the Borough Council to the Secretary of State or Planning Inspectorate. So the application is on the agenda tonight to consider, but the committee will not be making a formal decision on the application. We are simply asking members effectively to indicate what their decision would have been had we had jurisdiction over this application. I think it's important, Chairman, that members treat this application as if they were considering it in normal circumstances, and clearly to debate the issue and ask any questions that are relevant in reaching whatever motion they come to at the end of the debate.
Right, thank you. Councillor Clark indicating to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Could we just have some clarification? Could we just know the reason for the non-determination and why it didn't come within the requisite time for determining applications, please?
Mr. Pegram, can you answer that, please?
I'll start with the second one, the easy one, Chairman. Obviously, 8 weeks is quite a tight timescale, particularly to fit in the committee cycle. Most of the applications that come to this committee will be outside of the 8 or 13-week period. So it's not a failing, if you like. It's just, unfortunately, the way that meetings fall, it wasn't possible to bring this to members effectively to deal with all the repercussions from consultees, write a report, where a lead-in time for a planning committee is about 3 weeks, and to write a report and get it to committee within the 8 weeks. So that's why it's come to you outside the 8-week period. In terms of why the appellant has appealed non-determination, Chairman, that's one I can't advise on. It's their decision, obviously, to appeal non-determination. For what reason, I don't know.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, is that helpful?
Not really, Chairman. No, it doesn't explain to me the reason why. Was there a problem in determining the application? It just seems strange that there was a non-determination, because it's very unusual in this council. So I still unaware of what the reason is for coming to a non-determination.
Well, Mr. Pegram has explained it's the detail and the amount of time and effort work that has to go into the application. Is there anything you just want to confirm and add to that, Mr. Pegram?
Chairman, I don't want to influence the debate, to be quite honest. There is an issue which I am aware of, which might be a reason for the, but I'm only speculating. And as I say, I would not want to influence the debate. I think members need to consider this as they would do any other planning application that comes to them based on the information in the application and in the report before them. If there are questions, I'm happy to take those during the debate. But as I say, we haven't been given a reason why the applicant has appealed non-determination. They don't have to give us a reason. As I say, I could hazard a guess or speculate, but I don't want to influence the debate.
Sorry, Chairman, I'm not asking for why the applicant has put in for non-determination. I'm asking why it hasn't been determined within the time.
Yes, Mr. Pegram.
Chairman, quite simply, under the terms of the council's constitution, when we consult ward councillors on a planning application, if the view of the ward councillor differs from that of the recommendation, then it has to come before this committee. In this instance, we have one ward councillor objecting to the application and one ward councillor not objecting. So regardless of what our recommendation would have been on this application, it would have been before you. And as I say, the reason in that instance then it's not dealt with in the 8 weeks is purely because of the committee cycle. Clearly, we have to reach a point in the process where we've addressed any issues that have been raised by consultees on the application. And as I say, there's about a 3-week lead-in time for when the report has to be completed before it comes to this committee. So it's a matter of timing and cycles, and that's why it hasn't been dealt with inside the 8 weeks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pegram. Well, we're spending a lot of time discussing why it's been delayed or out of time. I think we need to move towards getting on to the actual item, but Councillor Goland is...
Just a quick question, really. Why are we discussing it? Does our decision have any bearing on what happens now?
Chairman?
Well, I was just going to say that yes, because if basically what happens is we have a slightly revised wording to whatever tonight's decision is, the recommendation is, which you will have seen in your late notices of comments, and it simply says it's recommended that the planning, instead of our usual wording, that it's recommended that permission is granted or refused, as we normally say for any planning application. There has to be a slight change of wording on here that says it's recommended that the planning inspectorate is informed that the Borough Council would have approved or whatever an application. So it's more of a procedural thing. Is that a fair description, Mr. Pegram, or have I got that confused?
Yeah, and I think in answer to Councillor Gowland's question, the issue is typically, an appeal is lodged against the refusal of planning permission. So we are aware of the position that we are defending on behalf of the council. Clearly, where they've appealed non-determination, we still have to indicate to the planning inspectorate what our decision would have been. That will also inform how the council mounts its case effectively. So, as I say, I don't want to lead members, but if members agree with the recommendation, that's a very different case to fight than if you were to resolve to refuse the application.
Is that helpful, Councillor Gowland? Okay, thank you. Right, well, I hope everyone's clear on that. So for really, we're all sort of used to planning committee meetings now. So as we're discussing and debating this application, just try not to think too much about the technicalities of what we've just been discussing. We need to discuss the application just as we would in any normal situation. So I think with that said, I don't think any other questions at this stage. So Mr. Pegram, if you start talking to the application, please.
Yes, Chairman. Can I just check Mrs. Sells had her hand up, and I don't know whether...
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see.
...question or she has a further point to make.
No.
Sorry, Mrs. Sells.
You summarised it well, Mr. Pegram.
Thank you very much. Right, Chairman, I'll share my screen with you.
Right, thank you.
If you can tell me when you can see that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Chairman, the application relates to 173 Loughborough Road. The property is on the corner of Loughborough Road, which is the north-south axis, and Chorworth Road, which runs roughly in a sort of east-west direction. The property, you can see on the aerial photograph, property is surrounded pretty much by hard surfacing in what is probably described as a predominantly residential area, but you do have, as set out in the report, a number of commercial premises, including the Volkswagen garage here, Asda a little bit further off the plan, and the Wolds shopping centre further to the south. Just to run through some photographs of the site, Chairman. This is the property in question. In 2002, it was granted permission for use as a dental surgery and was used for that purpose until relatively recently. That's again looking different angle, but you now pick up Chorworth Road there, and then Northwold Avenue is on the opposite side of the road there, and obviously Loughborough Road running straight ahead on the picture. That's then looking back the other way. So the application property is here. This is stood on the junction of Northwold Avenue. And you can see there's a toucan crossing in front of the site there with the Volkswagen garage just picked up in the background. That's now stood effectively on the northeast corner of that junction, looking, as I say, north along Loughborough Road. So this site is behind the photographer here. And then looking across the road at the junction with Northwold Avenue, and the property sits on the left-hand side here. That's looking back down Loughborough Road. So this is the junction of Chorworth Avenue and Loughborough Road. The application site just sticking out in the front of the picture here. And then again, just stood in the middle of the road there, safely on the traffic island, fortunately, looking north along Loughborough Road. These now look at the frontage of the property onto Chorworth Road. So this is the side elevation of the property. Looking across, so you can see Loughborough Road running in front. And then further down Chorworth Road to start picking up the relationship with other properties. Members may recall that permission was granted previously for this property to be demolished and for a 3-storey block of apartments. Clearly that permission has not yet been implemented. That's now looking effectively head on. That's the relationship between the two properties. So the application property on the right and that bungalow, which is on the left. And then again, just looking along the road to give you a feel for the character of the area. These pictures are now taken on, sorry, that one is taken on Chorworth Road. So the property is here. Part of the reason for taking these pictures, Chairman, is obviously to show the parking situation in the area. Many of the properties along this road built at a time when driveways weren't provided. So there is a heavy reliance for parking on Chorworth Road by those residents. And that stood on the opposite side of the pavement looking back. So this is the property sits on the corner of Loughborough Road and Chorworth Road, the opposite side of the junction. And then just moving further along Chorworth Road, just to show the character of the area. And then the final picture is taken at the opposite end of Chorworth Road, looking westerly along Chorworth Road with the application site at the far end of this road. These properties are now, sorry, these photographs, Chairman, are now taken on Northwold Avenue. Again, just to give you a flavour for the character of the area, but also the on-street parking situation in the area. And then some pictures inside the property. The majority of the alterations, Chairman, are to the inside of the property, removal of walls, conversion of the garage into a prayer room, but just to give you a feel of the interior of that property. So, Chairman, that is the existing layout, which you saw bits of in the photographs. This is a garage and store here. Various rooms that were used in connection with the dentist surgery. Parking along the northern elevation of the property, which is accessed off of Chorworth Road, and then an access which opens out onto Loughborough Road with additional parking around the property. As I say, Chairman, the proposal is to use the premises as a place of worship. And you can see that if I flick back actually to the previous, you can see that these two rooms, internal walls are demolished effectively to amalgamate rooms and create a bigger prayer room in that location. There is a slight reduction in parking, Chairman, because the parking as it was laid out originally caused concern for manoeuvring. This parking layout has been the subject. I won't go into these in detail, but you can see that the site has been tracked for manoeuvring of vehicles, and each parking space has been tracked to ensure that vehicles can enter the site, park in the spaces, and then leave in a forward gear. So that just gives you confidence that the parking has been laid out to enable those spaces to be used. Chairman, the application, as I say, seeks a change of use of the premises. A dental surgery and a place of worship are actually within the same use class, class D1. However, when we granted permission for the dentist surgery, it was subject to a condition that it should be used for dental surgery and no other purpose within Class D1, hence the need for this application. Chairman, I'm sure members have read the report and would have picked up the main factors of this. Clearly, there's an issue about potential noise and disturbance. There's also an issue about traffic generation and parking, which have been looked at. The Highway Authority initially raised some concerns, but following the provision of additional information, they came back confirming that they now do not object, subject to conditions. Similarly, Chairman, we have been in lengthy discussions with the environmental health officers over possible noise and disturbance, and they are now ultimately satisfied with the proposal, subject, Chairman, to a condition 4, which limits the operating hours of this premises to the hours of 7 in the morning until 11 in the evening. Chairman, having carried out those consultations and the amendments that have been made, your officers are satisfied that this use can be accommodated within the area without adversely impacting on highway safety and without causing unacceptable harm to the amenities of nearby residents. And clearly, Chairman, the original recommendation was to grant planning permission subject to the conditions. The revised condition, which I haven't got in front of me, but from memory, says that the inspectorate be advised that effectively you are content with that recommendation to grant permission subject to conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, thank you, Mr. Pegram. Well, I have, just to remind members, and I'm sure members have got this anyway, but the revised recommendation at the moment is, it says it's recommended that the planning inspectorate be informed that the Borough Council would have approved the application subject to the following conditions. That's what it says on the report at the moment. Now, in line of the way of working with the Planning Committee, we do have public speakers on this item. We have 2 speakers. First of all, I have Francis Williams, who I think is a resident, and I can see your name on the screen, Miss Williams. Are you with us?
Hello. Hi.
Oh, you're there. Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Now, the way it works is, apologies if you've already been told this, but the way it works is you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. If you're still talking when the 5 minutes is up, I have to tell you that it's up and you have to stop talking. So,
okay. I'll try.
So as soon as you're ready, if you'd like to address the committee. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. I'm speaking actually on behalf tonight of 134 of my neighbours on Shorworth Road and its adjacent streets. We've already sent you some supporting evidence for our case, and I hope you've had a chance to have a look at them. In doing this, we've disregarded evidence that the applicant is actually planning a more ambitious project on the site and number 85 next door. Our objections arise from the application in front of you and its operational characteristics. The applicant suggests that the size of the building will limit the number of users to 14. It actually won't. In reality, the fire safe capacity of the building is in excess of 100, not comfortable, but safe. Given the evident demand of such a facility in Bridgford, a maximum of only 14 seems unrealistic, and it's hard to imagine how numbers can possibly be limited. Highways did request occupancy information, and that might have been reassuring for us, but it wasn't supplied, and when we queried it with Highways, we didn't get a response. There's little information given on who will actually use the facility, but it seems reasonable to suppose that it'll be used by a particular tranche of the local community. The site is rightly described as being in the heart of a residential area, and as a proxy measure for catchment data, distribution of support suggests that potential users actually mainly live outside this immediate area, beyond easy walking distance, and for many beyond the reach of the number 10 bus. It's hard, therefore, to see how we can get, or how worshippers will be convinced not to use their cars, particularly in the evenings and when the weather is bad. We think the recommendation on restriction of hours doesn't really go far enough. It's a very big change from the dentists, and our understanding is that when the normal hours of the dentists were restricted by planning to 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. specifically to protect the amenity of local residents. In 2012, there was a local madrasa, or there is a local madrasa at 153 Loughborough. It was refused permission to extend its capacity beyond its maximum of 10 on the grounds of disturbance to neighbours. We can't really see how this application is any different. This madrasa actually closes at 6 and it advertises its capacity at 42. 11 p.m. is actually quite late for us, especially if external noise continues as worshippers disperse to their parked cars. Come 8 o'clock, families, the streets fall quiet, and disturbance like this really stands out. Chatting, car doors slamming, engines revving, and in the case of Northwold, as cars turn round to exit the cul-de-sac. Finally, limited hours would actually prevent the new facility operating as planned, and that does raise worries for us over compliance and enforcement. Chaworth Road operates as a single track road. It's very narrow, and with two-way traffic, cars have to pull in to allow each other to pass. At busy times, often cars can't pull in, and this creates bottlenecks and much elaborate manoeuvring and reversing. Delivery vans and cars dropping passengers off have to stop in the middle of the road, and it's quite common to find ourselves in a kind of stalemate, nose to nose with a van in front and cars piling up at both ends. The pressure will be made much worse by the significant increase in movements forecast by highways, a near six-fold increase for an assumed peak of 12 till 2. In fact, this assumption is not supported by the TRIX data quoted. There's simply no information for any other times. Finally, unlike the dentists, the traffic will hit local road in clusters around prayer times, and many of which will coincide with peak commuting and school hours. Parking. In non-COVID times, local parking is under stress. Cars using this under stress, sorry. Daily parking is boosted by commuters who use Chaworth Road in particular as a park and ride facility. In the evening, parking comes under pressure as residents arrive home,
30
and
seconds.
our own survey exemplifies this. At 8 o'clock on a Wednesday, there were more cars parked on Chaworth Road than there were actual streets. I'd like to mention safety. It's a cycle route. But what I'd like to say in conclusion, it's evident that West Bridgford needs a mosque and we'd endorse it, but this is quite simply the wrong facility in the wrong place. Thank you very much for listening. I still have some time. Yeah, the cycle route. It's a designated cycle route.
That's time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I was just getting confused with the switcher turns the microphone on and off. So thank you, Mrs. Williams. That was well within your, well, just on 5 minutes. So thank you for that. Now, our other speaker on this item is one of the local ward members, Councillor Gray. So if you'd like to address the committee, please. And oh, there you are. Yep. So as soon as you're ready, please.
Thank you. I'm assured this application has gained more comments than any other in recent years, even more than the proposed forest ground. So myself and fellow ward councillor, Councillor Begum, believed it would only be right for it to be considered by the planning committee. This was to make sure that all arguments for and against can be made in a public forum. And this is why we placed one comment for and one comment against the application. We've spoken to many residents about the application, including the applicant and the agent, and we hope we've been able to listen to all sides of the arguments presented and provide some help and information for those involved. The case is well set out for the application. West Bridgford has a growing Muslim community, but does not have a local place of worship. This application could provide that facility, as well as reusing the redundant former dental practice, reduce car use to locations outside of the borough. It's also said to improve community interfaith and social connectivity and provide a new community amenity in West Bridgford. As you've just heard, many of the neighbours of the proposed site acknowledge the need for such an amenity in West Bridgford, but fear the knock-on effects. Fear what the knock-on effects could be for life on Chaworth Road and the surrounding streets, particularly concerning traffic on these already heavily parked and heavily used cut-through roads. There is also concern over the noise made by people coming and going early in the morning and late at night. And as has already been mentioned, the former dentist surgery had conditions on its hours of operation for just this reason. But we do, of course, hope that the committee will give this application its usual fair and considered treatment. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Councillor Gray. Well within 5 minutes. So we've heard from our speakers on that. Mrs. Williams has said we're speaking on behalf of herself and 134 residents of Chorworth Road and area. She has some disagreements regarding the suggested number of users, and is concerned about highway impact on both Chorworth Road, other roads, in terms of traffic and also parking. Likewise, she queries who will use it. Will it just be people from West Bridgford, or will perhaps people be coming from out of area? She referred to the suggested hours as not really been suitable for in terms of potential disturbance to neighbours and noise and traffic. She pointed out it's a busy road, busy route, and sometimes there's conflict of traffic on there at all times of day. Apparently there's also quite a lot of parking takes place by commuters using the area as a park and ride, and she's worried about safety for other road users such as cyclists. She agrees, accepts there is a need in West Bridgford for such a facility, but believes this is the wrong facility in the wrong place. We heard from Councillor Gray, who explained that he and the other ward councillor, one is supporting, one is against the application, and because he wants all the facts and arguments for and against to be heard, which they will be tonight. That's what the committee is for. And he also says that there is no local place of worship, and that there is a need, and accepts that there is a need in the area, but again is worried about road impact, noise and parking, and feels that this again is perhaps the wrong place. So I think that's covered the comments made by our speakers. Mr. Pegram, would you like to come back on any of those before we go into a discussion, please?
Just a couple of points, Chairman. Firstly, I'd like to emphasise that the application is for a place of worship, regardless of the faith that may be practised in the building. I think it's, if I can draw the analogy with when the committee considered an application for an A1 supermarket at Ed Walton, it was an application for an A1 supermarket, not Waitrose. So we're in a similar situation here. We are dealing with an application for a place of worship. Chairman, in terms of the numbers that could be accommodated within this property, which has generated quite a bit of debate, to be quite honest, the applicants say that the building could accommodate 14 people praying at any one time. The opposite end of the scale, the objectors are suggesting that the building has a capacity of circa 100. Having looked into that, Chairman, I understand that that is based on the document B in the building regulations, which sets out capacity of buildings based on the floor area of those buildings. That would suggest, Chairman, that, as I say, the equation that the objectors have carried out is that the floor space of this building could accommodate something in the region of 100 people, including I think it's 42 on the first floor in the loft space, in the rooms in the roof. Clearly, Chairman, the way the building would be used, rooms would not be used in that way all at once. You wouldn't have people all stood in the library or in the upstairs rooms while there's praying going on downstairs, is my understanding. Chairman, just to sort of provide some sort of mediation between those figures, what the Highway Authority have done is used a TRIX database, which is a database for predicting traffic generation and flows for different uses depending on the size of those premises. So they have taken the floor area, they've also compared it with a similar type of facility and come up with the traffic generation which is set out in the report. I think in reality, Chairman, it could be lower, but ultimately you have the information before you to consider. Just that's it, Chairman. I think that's the only points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pegram. Actually, you've answered one question which I suspect would come up tonight in all innocence, and that is we've read about tricks, and where perhaps colleagues may not be totally familiar with what that is, but you've just explained that. So thank you for that. So we're now going to discussion and debate, and remembering what we were told earlier about the final recommendation when we get to that. So who would like to start off with us, please? Anyone got any questions or comments? Or right, hands. I can see hands. Councillor Clark, I think you just got in first.
Oh, well, I was trying not to.
And then I've got Councillor Goland as well.
And Councillor Mason has her electronic hand up, Chairman.
Oh, has she? Oh, I haven't seen that, but I've got it now. Okay, I can see your hand now. So Councillor Clark, then Councillor Goland, then Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was hanging back to see if anybody else made any comment. However, yeah, this is a very difficult application in terms of trying to assess what the actual impact is, and the impact has gone into in quite some detail in the report. I do want to, I can slightly echo the residents' comment that I think this is probably the wrong location. I've no problem with the need for places of worship in the Rushcliffe area, but I think in my view this is the wrong location because analogies are tending to be drawn with commercial operation as against on one side of the road as against the centre of residential on the other side of the road. And I think the impact of parking problems and to a lesser extent the traffic problems as well as the noise is very much the relevant factors because some comment has already been made about Asda, about the Volkswagen garage. Well, they have their own car parks, substantial car parks, and the noise is contained within their own premises much further away because there are vehicles just coming and going and they're extensive premises. These are very focused, very small premises, and they are in a residential area. Comparisons have been drawn with the dental practice, but comment has been made. It's quite a different operation. The dental practice has only perhaps 1, 2 or 3 people coming or going at any one time when it was operating. And it had, and it's acknowledged, that there were constraints on the hours of operation for the very reason that they did not want to impact on the amenities of the residents. And therefore, that's why those hours of operation were put on. The parking facilities are, as we've seen, are only 14. That's 13 plus the one disabled space. But in paragraph 59, the Highways Authority acknowledged that the parking arrangements are substandard, and by that I mean it relates to the dimensions that face onto Chilworth Road. And I would have thought with this being considered as a new application, then that is the time when you should look at the parking provision again and make sure things are no longer substandard, because it is a new application in terms of the change of use. And I think the change of use is quite different to the previous use, because it was just customers, patients coming and going pretty much constantly, but in a pattern, in a spread pattern throughout the day. The proposed use for this are very concentrated times. I have no idea when those photographs of Chilworth Road were taken, but they were certainly not taken either early morning or in the evening, probably somewhere around lunchish time, because, and I probably just between you and I, Mr. Chairman, I'm making a bit of confession here. I confess to using Shawworth Road myself fairly regularly. Perhaps I shouldn't, but what I'm saying is, by virtue of using Shawworth Road, I can tell you that I've always evidenced cars parked across along the whole length of Shawworth Road with very few spaces, which is why the residents made comments about it being virtually a single track road and having to pull in or even back up in certain cases to let vehicles through. So it's already congested. So expecting people to walk to these premises is not going to be realistic, because we saw on the website there were letters of support from people. Well, in fact, there was some from Derby, for heaven's sake, some from north of Nottingham, and certainly they're not going to be walking to this site, are they? And I would venture to suggest that people from other areas or far-flung areas of West Bridgford will not be walking. I would suggest that there are going to be a lot of people driving to this particular site, and therefore the parking provision of 14 I'm sure is going to be quite inadequate. Number of 14 using the premises was mentioned in the report. Whether it's 14 or whether it's a much higher number, it still begs the question, who is going to check what numbers are actually using these premises, and who's going to enforce it if a maximum number was put on it? In terms of the noise and nuisance, I think it's completely unrealistic to expect the residents to have to endure noise very early in the morning and late in the evening. And so I'm surprised that the officers didn't recommend a condition that the hours of operation be limited to, say, between 8 and 8 or 7 and 7 in order to limit the noise and nuisance that will be perhaps endured by the neighbouring residents. The paragraph 35 does refer, and perhaps another thing that Mr. Pegram could just confirm, paragraph 35 does talk about the question as to whether there is any audible call for prayer at certain prayer times. Whether, if that's going to be the case, is there any limit on the noise emanating from the building? But I think what a lot of concern from residents appears to be that at certain times there's going to be concentrated noise from the premises when people are coming and going, getting in and out of their cars, etc., etc. And I would have thought that if there is going to be a problem with parking, then that's going to add to congestion, people looking for parking places and not being able to find them and driving around and just creating additional congestion. But I think the prime problem will be, especially late at night when it's at night time, noise carries a lot more than during the day. Cars banging, people saying goodbye, hello, etc., etc. So I think there is a definite issue regarding both noise nuisance and parking in particular. And I do feel that this is the wrong location for this particular type of premises. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to actually propose that the planning inspector be informed that had we been determining the application, permission would be refused on the grounds that, one, inappropriate use of the premises by virtue of proposed long and unsociable operating hours, giving rise to unacceptable noise, nuisance and disturbance in early morning and late evening with the potential for unacceptable noise provision. 2, inadequate parking on site, giving rise to unacceptable parking on neighbouring residential streets, which are already fully utilised, thereby depriving residents of parking availability and creating congestion as drivers try to locate other parking. I think I was going to talk about any other noise nuisance, but I think, Mr. Chairman, it'd be interesting to hear confirmation from Mr. Pegram as to regarding any other public address apparatus that may well be proposed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Well, you've made a recommendation there. Do you have a seconder at this stage for that proposal? Councillor Major. Oh, we just need to turn your microphone on.
Sorry, yes, I'm happy to second that.
Right, thank you. Now, I have got other speakers on this item. Just before I go to that, Mr. Pegram, do you want to come back on any of the queries that Councillor Clark raised there, in particular with the noise query and the noise query?
Just 2 points, Chairman. We have had confirmation that there would not be an audible call to prayer. In terms of the numbers, Councillor Clark asked the question, who would check the numbers?
Who would monitor, yeah.
Chairman, we have not recommended a condition limiting the numbers that would be able to be accommodated on this premises, simply because it would be, in my view, unenforceable. It would be difficult to monitor those numbers and who was on the premises at any one time. Chairman, sorry, on the issue of noise as well, there is a condition 5, which requires the submission of a detailed noise management plan. Chairman, I have to admit I can't write as quickly as Councillor Clark spoke, but I noticed he was perhaps reading something, and depending on the outcome of this application, I may need a discussion with him to crib those notes from him.
Indeed, and like you, I can't write that quickly either. So,
Chairman, it is handwritten on some note paper. If I typed it, I could email it to you straight away. But I perfectly accede to Mr. Pegram's request as and when it becomes necessary.
Alternatively, okay. I can liaise with Mrs. Sells, who I saw scribbling frantically as well.
Right, well, we've still got a way to go yet. So my next speaker is Councillor Goland, please.
Okay, so first of all, I think it's a little bit harsh to say this is the wrong position for this building, this use, because, you know, there are residential areas that could like be in the middle of Chorworth Road. This is actually on Loughborough Road on the corner. So there are worse places this could be, if you could put it like that. Clearly, the occupancy is the major issue. I'm not clear why we can't put an occupancy level on. I understand what you're saying about being able to enforce it, Mr. Pegram, but at least it would, you know, indicate our intention. Also, I'm thinking of the case of overgrown pastures, where we previously gave, what was it, temporary or a provisional planning permission, where we asked for noise monitoring to be made during the next year, as we discussed at the beginning of this meeting. And I wonder if we could do the same here to try to alleviate concerns of residents, just to say we've checked what the noise levels are during the year. But I can't quite understand if we couldn't at least set an occupancy limit so people break it. And we know we have enforcement procedures, don't we?
Mr. Pegram.
Chairman, the NPPG sets out the tests that conditions have to satisfy. One of those 6 tests is that they have to be enforceable. In order to monitor or ensure that a specified limit were not being exceeded, we would need an officer present at each prayer session. In my view, that would be a very difficult one to resource and totally unreasonable. And for that reason, my advice to the committee is that such a condition would not satisfy the enforceable tests. Councillor Gowland, the other query, in terms of a temporary permission, Chairman.
Yeah,
I think in this
year, for example.
I think in this instance, and I alluded to it on the other item that Councillor Gowland refers to, in this instance, they are going to have to carry out some physical alterations to the building, which would incur costs. Again, you have tests, and one of those tests is that the condition should be reasonable.
Yeah.
And given the work that would need to be carried out to the building and the cost of that work, I don't think it would be reasonable in this instance to grant a temporary permission.
Yeah, fair enough. I understand.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Right, Councillor Mason, please.
Right, thank you very much. Well, quite a few of the questions that I had written down here have already been answered. But one of the things that I do have a problem with is the issue of amount of people. When we have applications from public houses, whether they're new or old, they're given a number and they have to abide by. And somehow we manage to do that. So I'm not quite sure how that works. Also, I do have an issue, yes, with traffic, especially as it's on the crossroads, and both the entrance and exit are quite near to a crossroad. It's being on a corner. On the other hand, I do know that a mosque has been wanted in West Bridgford by the group of people for some time. And I recognise that perhaps it is difficult to find somewhere within West Bridgford, but I still think that this looks to me like it's the wrong place. I realise now that there's no call to prayer, so that's fair enough. But goodness, from 7 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, that is longer hours than than pubs used to be open. Now they can be, but I just feel that the hours are very long for worship, and I recognise that also, though, that it is difficult, this one, and I have struggled with this, and I've read it a few times, but I still do feel that it is not the right place, and I do struggle with the amount of people that are allowed in. I cannot see that there will only be 14 people at any one time. I'm sure it will be popular. So at the moment, until I think differently by the end of the meeting, I will be supporting refusal.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mason. Thank you, Councillor Mason. I'm not sure if we need to come back on any of those points. I can see Mr. Pegram busily writing things down and nodding his head or shaking his head. So we'll go on to Councillor Murray, please. Oh, microphone, please.
There are many places of worship in West Bridgford. Have any of the churches or Kingdom Hall or any of the other places of worship, have they got parking spaces? I can't think of any at all.
I'm not sure. Do we know, Mr. Pegram?
I can give a bit of perspective on this, only from the point of view that we do use some places of worship for elections and voting. And when I'm working on the elections, I have to drive around sometimes and pick up postal votes and things like that, or inspect the premises. My recollection, Chairman, is that if any of the premises do have parking, in some instances it's very limited, and in other cases non-existent. I think would be the answer. I can't say categorically because I haven't done a survey on all the other premises, but I would say that there is very few that would have enough parking spaces to accommodate the whole congregation.
Oh, definitely not. I was just thinking there are 14 parking spaces. If there were 4 in a car, that would be 56 people who could use the place of worship. I can't think that that building would have many more than that. So there might not be a problem with parking. Some people can walk to it, some people can get the bus or ride a bike. So they've actually got far more parking than any of the other places of worship.
Well, yes, that is an interpretation and a calculation that is helpful and useful. So I don't know. We need to come back on that, do we? I think that's just an observation.
I think it's more an observation than the question.
Yeah, it's an observation that Councillor Murray has made. Right. Councillor Verdi, please.
Thank you, Chair. Not wishing to duplicate and replicate all that has already been said. I mean, at the outset, I would firstly endorse I think the general view by my fellow councillors and members of the committee that there does appear to be a need for a facility which allows for a place of worship for this particular community and proposal. That aside, in terms of the pros and cons, if you like, of what has been discussed already, I think Councillor Clark very comprehensively summarised most of the points and issues. And really what I wanted to bring out was most of our statutory consultees have highlighted potential issues that could be, here as a result of this facility being implemented, whether it's occupancy, whether it's the traffic, or whether it's some of the other issues that we've already discussed. My main point, Chair, I wanted to raise was, Mr. Pegram, most of the report is predicated on, in my view, many assumptions, be it occupancy level, the flexibility and the variability of those occupancy levels, and so on, and the consequential impact on traffic or nuisance or noise is very much based on those assumptions. And you have clearly stated that this is unenforceable in terms of, for example, the number of numbers that may wish to use the facility. So I do find it rather contradictory in terms of the recommendation based on assumptions which may or may not happen, and the concerns which local residents have put forward in terms of the noise, the traffic issues and so on. I'm not reassured. I'm not reassured looking at the report and the recommendation that the mitigation that you've presented, in my view, necessarily provides a balanced argument in terms of acceptance at this stage. And as I said, I do feel the occupancy is one of the biggest issues here alongside the traffic, and that is unenforceable, and it could vary considerably. There is also a disconnect, in my view, about the potential to use the facility by local residents. I mean, clearly there is a lot of support. It's widespread support, and I cannot see, worshippers visiting this particular place of worship with the local bus routes that are currently available. I do agree with some of the comments already made that I suspect there will be a lot of vehicular traffic here. So, as I said, I'm in danger of repeating a lot of the points that have been made, but I do feel a lot of this is based on assumptions. The recommendation is based on assumptions, which some of them are unenforceable, which you've clearly stated. So it is a difficult one, but I'm inclined at the moment to agree with Councillor Clark and Councillor Major in terms of the proposal and the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Verdi. Well, I'm sure Mr. Pegram would say that the comments in the report, many of which or most of which are based on the observations and comments that have come in from various consultees. So it's not so all the writer of the report is saying, especially summarising or reporting the observations that have come in from the statutory consultees and indeed members of the public. Anything to add on that, Mr. Pegram?
No, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Right, do I have any other, Councillor John Stockwood, please? And then Councillor Healy afterwards.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
So the two planning matters regarding this place of worship that seem to be the points of contention in my mind are the noise issue and the traffic issue. The noise relates to whether or not the activities within or projected from the building affect the residential amenity of the neighbours. And there's a noise management plan proposed, which would address, would ensure that mitigation is put in place to prevent impact on the neighbours. So if there are a large number of people, but they cannot be heard outside of the property, or they're not having a noise impact on the neighbours, then the number of people isn't the issue. It's, to my mind, it's the amount of noise that they generate. If it's one person making an enormous amount of noise, that would be a noise impact on the neighbour. The number of people, the occupancy, is, to my mind, not the particular point, but the noise that those occupants make is the point. And I think a noise management plan could address those issues. Again, there is an annual travel plan monitoring report to address in condition 10, which would seek to address traffic issues. Unfortunately, my concern there is it talks about, it's perhaps my understanding of condition number 10, but it talks about collating parking information to ascertain the level of off-site parking, and then targets and measures and monitoring and enforcement mechanisms. The applicant is, I'm not clear how the applicant would have enforcement mechanisms for off-site parking, because off-site parking by definition is outside of the control of the applicant. And so it would never be the case that they would be able to enforce those matters, as far as I can see. I think I believe that with appropriate positive conditions, this application could be a positive contribution to the local community. But I feel that that particularly the annual travel plan monitoring report and the problems we've had with the monitoring of travel plans in the past is that condition would, I'm not clear how an applicant could monitor effectively and enforce off-site parking issues. And the way we've dealt with substantial changes before is we did give them 12-month planning applications. When a business came to Bingham in a site where it was suggested that there would be significant traffic problems immediately adjacent to a railway, they were given a 12-month permission. That business had to invest in equipment, it had to invest in facilities, it had to invest in drainage. They all had costs, and they were only given a 12-month permission. But they went ahead. It was considered, and in those 12 months, they've demonstrated that they're a positive contribution to the area. And I think a similar issue in West Bridgford was a social club where people had significant concerns about the change of use and what impact it might have on the area, and that was given a 12-month permission. So, because of the uncertainty around how this annual travel plan monitoring report would work, I am more inclined to go back to a positive approval of the application, but with conditions whereby it could be looked at again in 12 months' time. But perhaps Mr. Pegram or somebody else could explain how number 10 would actually work with regards to controlling or managing a situation of off-site parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwood. Well, we have a direct question there about how would we monitor off-site car parking, which is basically parking on the roads here and there, isn't it? Do we have any thoughts on
Chairman, yes, the whole purpose of a travel plan is not necessarily to control where people park. Typically, a travel plan is about encouraging multi-occupancy vehicles, about using buses, walking, cycling, those types of issues. So when you obviously the county council would normally monitor travel plans, certainly if they were within a section 106 or something of that nature. But basically, the applicant would be required to collate information. So obviously, potentially when people arrived at the premises, ask how they travelled to the premises, did they come in a car, how many people in that car, and obviously then put in place initiatives to encourage, as I say, those multiple occupancy trips and other modes of transport. Clearly, that then has an impact on the amount of off-street parking, on-street parking elsewhere in the site, in the area, sorry. So it's not necessarily about controlling where those people park. It's trying, through a travel plan, to minimise the impact of off-site parking in the area.
Right. Councillor Stockwood, is that helpful? Or do you want to come back on that?
Well, I mean, I can understand what how travel plans work, and I think councillors perhaps are aware that we've had a lot of problems with who is actually responsible for monitoring travel plans in the past, because applications for many different uses end up having a travel plan, but who is actually monitoring them and who is enforcing them is a recurring issue from my experience in the planning committee. But, you know, we've been given an answer to the question, and it's for councillors as decision makers to consider whether condition 10 is going to address the concerns regarding traffic. And I've explained my thinking on that point, but other councillors wish to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stockwood. Right, I've got Councillor Healy had indicated to speak.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly on the numbers, I noticed going through the papers, one of the residents against the proposal stated that there could be a potential 1,500 worshippers locally who would probably be wanting to use the site. Now, clearly in its present size, I doubt if it could accommodate all those worshippers. And my concern really is, having got a change of use, I'm just wondering what that could actually lead to in terms of the potential size of the building. Thank you, Chair.
I think it's difficult to pick on that, isn't it?
Only, Chairman, to advise you must consider the application.
Yes,
before
it is in front of
what might
so,
be in the future. Indeed.
So again, yes, I think Councillor Healy, we're falling into that common thing of what ifs or what might occur. But we can only look at the application that's in front of us at the moment.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right. Well, you sound a bit despondent then, did you? But
no, I think it's a consideration that has to be made, and you know, potentially it could be a much larger site. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I understand, but we are looking at the application that's in front of us. Okay. Councillor Golan, please.
Oh, my phone's ringing. Sorry. I just want to come back on what Councillor Stockwood said. His arguments about temporary planning permission. Can we just revisit that again? Because maybe the applicant would rather have temporary planning permission than no planning permission.
Procedural matter there, I think.
Chairman, reference was made to other activities or other proposals. Clearly, I haven't got the specific details in front of me. I am familiar with one particular one that was referred to in West Bridgford. In that instance, there were very little, if any, physical alterations to the building other than maybe decorating. I repeat my advice to members that you have to consider what is reasonable. And obviously there is, in my view, I don't know what the cost would be, there is cost involved in knocking down walls and converting this property to the proposed use. And for that reason, I don't believe a temporary permission would be reasonable.
And also, I assume practical as well is another consideration, is it? But
that's not one of the tests, but
oh right, okay. But reasonable being the official
yes.
Tessa, you can apply. Councillor Thomas.
A couple of things really. Mr. Pegram said that in order to enforce a condition on capacity, he would have to send an officer to every prayer meeting, which I don't think that's necessarily the case. The reason that you have such conditions and limits is that if there is a problem, you can then check them out at the time. So I wouldn't agree with that really. And the other thing I was going to ask was, who asked for the travel plan, and does Highways feel that there is an issue with the traffic and parking?
Right. Well, there are comments. The Highways people have reported in here. I've just lost a paragraph for a moment.
Chairman, I think the Highways did initially raise some concerns. You have the iteration of the Highway comments from their first comment through to their final comment. To sum it up, though, Highways, based on the provision of additional information, were satisfied on highway grounds that this proposal would not cause a severe impact on the network and would not cause road safety problems.
So that's the that's the answer to that question, Councillor Thomas, and it's in the report. Now, I did see another hand flash up. Was it Councillor Clark, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry to come back with a couple of things. Firstly, Councillor Murray raised a very fair point about other places of worships, and some have parking provision, and to be fair, some do not have parking provision. However, those places of worship don't have, as far as I'm aware, extended hours of operation, throughout the entire day. I'm not saying they're restricted to Sundays, but they're certainly not from 7 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. So that parking provision is quite different and varied. The thing I wanted to come back on particularly, I want to just make one other point. That I noticed that even one of the comments made from out the north of Nottingham, they come to visit relatives on Shorworth Road, and even now they were giving evidence that they have problems finding a place to park to visit their relatives even now. However, the main thing was that I omitted to, because we started talking about the noise, and I omitted to mention a third reason for refusal, and it depends on whether Councillor Major will be prepared to accept this as well. And it does encompass what we've already been talking about. The inability to regulate the maximum number of persons occupying the premises at any one time, thereby giving rise to potential over-intensive use of the premises with subsequent increased parking and traffic issues. So we don't know from a safety point of view how many people there are likely to be. We've heard evidence given already that we've no method of checking to see whether the maximum number of people is a safe number or not. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Major, if we get to that point, are you happy to include that in the in your recommendations?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Right. Councillor Thomas.
I was just going to say, we could put that on almost any application, Councillor Clark, in terms of any application for a house or any sort of facility, any employment, any hospitality venue could have that comment made for it, that it could be occupied by more people than anticipated and could be over-intensive use of the plot. So that is, in my view, not something that should be added to the conditions. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Okay. Now, I think we've had quite a long discussion on this. I don't see anyone indicating to speak. So we're in a position where a recommendation has been made to refuse, and that's been seconded. Oh, Mr. Pegram, you're wanting to say something.
Chairman, yes, just to advise on the reasons for refusal, and obviously Councillor Clark did add in a third, which Councillor Major hasn't yet indicated approval or rejection to.
Oh, I think she has. I think
I did, but then,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm happy for that to be left out on the basis of Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, Chairman, like I've often said, you don't need loads of reasons, you just need one good reason.
Yeah.
I think the reasons that Councillor Clark initially put forward are certainly based on material considerations. Clearly, we would have to provide evidence to defend those reasons for refusal. I think the third one would provide us with some difficulty in defending that. Certainly in terms of the highway assessment, they've used the TRIX database, which does draw a comparison. So it's based on, if you like, objective evidence of how other facilities operate. And therefore, I think it's, as I say, we've said that the property is self-regulating in terms of the size, but also the TRIX database would not suggest that that would become a reality, in my view, Chairman.
Chairman, to move things on, I'll move things on. I'll with, in view of what Councillor Major said, I'll withdraw that third reason so that we can move along.
Right, thank you. That's very helpful, Councillor Clark. Now, for the benefit of clarity and for people writing this down, Mr. Pegram, would you like Councillor Clark to go through the reasons again, or are you clear? Or is everyone clear?
Yeah, I think the gist of them, Chairman, is noise and disturbance, including early morning and late at night, and then parking issues. I didn't catch the full gist of it, but I understand where Councillor Clark was coming from on that issue.
Righty-ho. Okay, and is everyone else clear on that? I assume so. Right, I think we better get ready to make a decision on this. Well, I say decision, but the recommendation as per the current situation with regard to the other matter of it being ultimately decided by the Secretary of State. So, Mrs. Sells, are you going to lead us through this, please?
Yeah, so this is, as we've said, for or against, to advise the Secretary of State that we would have refused for the reasons we've given. Running through alphabetically, Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Goland.
Sorry, against.
Councillor Healy.
For.
Councillor Major.
For.
Councillor Mason.
For.
Councillor Murray.
Against.
Councillor J Stockwood.
Against.
Councillor M Stockwood.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
Against.
And Councillor Verdi.
For.
That's 7 for and 4 against, so the motion carries.
Right, thank you. So do we just need to clarify the wording again for the benefit of this what is an appeal situation now?
Chairman, I'm happy to type out what I've handwritten and email that to Mr. Pegram if that suits. As I say, I've got it handwritten. I didn't actually type it. Otherwise, I could have emailed it to you already. And I'm happy to do that. I won't do it during the meeting because that will be unfair. As soon as the meeting's finished, I will undertake to type that out immediately the meeting's finished.
Okay, thank you. That's appreciated. And as we've mentioned a couple of times this evening, this decision we've taken tonight is informing the planning inspectorate as to what a decision would have been had this been the final decision. Hope that makes sense. Yep. Okay, right. Thank you. So we'll move on to our next item. So I hope everyone is clear on the outcome of that. We basically permission is not granted, or our opinion is not to grant permission for reasons given. Putting it another way. Right. So we'll move on to our next application tonight from my papers, which is land lease of 75 Walcott Drive, West Bridgford. This is a demolition of existing garages and the erection of 5 dwellings with associated parking. Again, Mr. Pegram, please.
Thank you, Chairman. There is, again, a late representation.
Oh, we've got a late, yes, I beg your pardon, we've got late representation.
Circulated confirming highways do not object.
Yep.
So, confirm you can see my screen, Chairman.
Yes, yes, I can see the screen, yeah.
Thank you. So, Chairman, the application before you in this item relates to a site east of 75 Walcott Drive at West Bridgeford. The site outlined in red here is a garage forecourt. Access into the forecourt is at the northern end of the site. Garage is obviously facing in onto that forecourt. There is a green area of open space which is owned by the Borough Council, and you'll see from the photographs there is a tree that stands within that open space. That is the aerial view of the site, again just showing those garages you saw, and you can pick up now the tree in that location. So this is the site in question, Chairman, a bungalow to the south. There are two-storey properties, as you'll see in a minute, to the west and to, actually that's north, I do apologise. No, so that is south. Two-storey properties to the east and north of the site. As you can see there, picking up now those properties coming into view. You can see the access into the garage forecourt. And then that stood within the garage forecourt, looking back out onto Walcott Drive, the existing neighbouring property there. And then looking in a generally easterly direction towards the back of the site, you can see the two-storey properties at the rear. There is a little network of footpaths that effectively run between and alongside these properties, which is evident from other photographs and the plans. That's a bit closer in, stood in a similar position, looking at those same properties. Turning around slowly now, looking more southeasterly, the garages, the properties beyond. And then looking south to the bungalow, which sits beyond the end of the site there, and an electricity substation, as shown in those pictures there. As I say, Chairman, there are some footpaths that run down a side of the properties, and there's also a footpath. So this is the back of the easternmost block of garages, and that's the properties to the east, which do not benefit from vehicle road frontage. They are accessed by foot. You can see the footpaths that effectively subdivide the site. That plan, Chairman, just confirms the application site outlined in red. This is an application by Metropolitan Housing, and the areas outlined in blue are the other areas which are owned by them or in their control. The proposal, Chairman, is for a terrace of 5 properties, a 3-bedroom property on the plot there, plot 1, 3 2-bedroomed mid-terrace properties on those 3 plots there, and then a 4-bedroom property at the southern end of the site. Vehicle parking across the front of the site. The scheme was revised, Chairman. There was a reduction in 1 parking space, which enabled the provision of effectively open space or green fingers, landscaped areas with trees on to mitigate the loss of the tree that would be felled. That is the elevational details, traditional design, brick and tiled roof. And then just to confirm, Chairman, the layout of those properties. So the one on plot 1 would be a 3-bedroom property, 3 2-bedroom properties in the middle, and a 4-bedroom property at the end. That plan, Chairman, just shows you the tree that would be removed as part of the proposal, properties fronting onto Walcott Drive. Chairman, obviously this is part of a programme of developments. You've seen several previously for redevelopment of garage forecourts or this type of thing by the Housing Association to provide affordable housing within the borough. It is within a highly sustainable location. It's arguably the redevelopment of a previously developed site, but the principle of the development is considered to be acceptable. The other issues, Chairman, which are clearly relevant to this are the design and impact on the character and the amenities in the area, including the amenities of neighbouring properties. In fairness, Chairman, the separation distances in this instance are a little below what we would normally seek to achieve. However, if I go back to this plan, effectively there is a character or a pattern of development in the area which this would not be dissimilar to. And on that basis, your officers felt on balance that the layout, garden sizes, etc., were considered to be acceptable. Chairman, on that basis, the application is before you with a recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. That's very clear. And we have speakers on this item as well. We have 2 speakers again. The first speaker is Andrew Gatehouse, who is the applicant. So, Mr. Gatehouse, I think, are you with us? I think yes, we can see you. We've done this before, haven't we? On previous meetings. So, for similar application. So you'll be familiar with the process. Up to 5 minutes to address the committee, and as soon as you start speaking, the clock starts counting down.
Thank you, and good evening, Chairman. Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Andrew Gatehouse. I'm an Assistant Development Manager and the applicant presenting this scheme on behalf of Metropolitan Housing Trust. As mentioned, we are a housing association. We primarily operate in the East Midlands and London, and Rushcliffe is a core local authority area in which we provide, own and manage over 4,000 homes. We're pleased to bring forward this proposal, which will deliver homes in line with our goals, as well as strengthening our relationship with Rushcliffe Borough Council. We do believe that the redevelopment of small and infill sites can make a valuable contribution to housing supply. And accordingly, we have identified the opportunity to redevelop smaller sites for new locally affordable homes. I would now like to outline some of the key benefits that this proposal will bring to the borough, to local residents and the surrounding area. In terms of Rushcliffe Borough benefits, the proposed development will make a small but significant contribution towards Rushcliffe's annual target of new homes, providing 5 new family-sized homes which are proposed as rented accommodation. The scheme provides 100% affordable housing. It is also worth noting that in March 2018, Rushcliffe Borough Council Cabinet approval was granted for the council-owned grass verge in front of the garage site to be disposed of to MHT at a nil value, representative of the fact that the need for the asset no longer exists. The shared vision was to facilitate the delivery of affordable housing in the borough as determined by the council and to help address local housing needs. For local residents, the proposed housing scheme will enable access for local people to affordable rented homes. The proposed development provides 7 on-plot parking spaces which are associated with the new homes, and this level of parking provision is considered acceptable by the Highways Authority. The proposed scheme also incorporates replacement tree planting to offset the removal of an existing tree and to improve the appearance of the development in the street scene. Surrounding area benefits. This site is not subject to any site-specific allocations or designations. The design of the development has been carefully considered in relation to the existing site context, the surrounding area, and in accordance with the Rushcliffe Residential Design Guide. The proposed development will replace the existing garages with high-quality, new, family-sized homes of appropriate massing and scale that responds to the surrounds and respects neighbouring residents' amenity. Based on overall borough-wide need, we understand that there is a demand for affordable housing of all types in all locations. So to conclude, Metropolitan Housing Trust has a strong connection with the borough in delivering affordable housing, and this proposed development at Walcott Drive in West Bridgford seeks to deliver new affordable homes. We would ask that the committee support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gatehouse. That's well within the 5 minutes. I hope everyone heard that. There was a bit of noise on the computer, but I think we all heard. Okay. Our other speaker on this is the local ward member again, and it's Councillor Gray again, please. You're getting a full go this evening.
Quite right. Yes, I'll be brief with this. I mean,
no, you've got up to 5 minutes. Don't worry. So as soon as you're ready.
Right. So I place an objection into this application as local residents of the neighbouring properties in particular express concerns about the massing of the building and overlooking their properties, particularly the bungalow, and also as Mr. Pegram mentioned in his presentation, the closeness of these properties to those existing. Obviously, anything that was put forward by the residents would have been considered by the officers but the residents obviously completely really appreciated the opportunity to have these further scrutinised by the committee. As always, I trust the committee will give this application all due consideration. Thank you.
All right. Yes, you were brilliant. Still writing it down. Right. Okay. Thank you. Those are our public speakers on this item. We heard from Mr. Gatehouse, who is the applicant, and was telling us about a bit of the history about Metropolitan and Rushcliffe. These will be 100% affordable housing aimed at local people, and they're replacing old garages. The 7 parking spaces will be provided, which is considered acceptable by the highways people, and the idea is these will be new high quality homes. Councillor Gray is speaking on behalf of residents, or sorry, neighbours, in particular worried about massing of the development and overlooking concerns of the bungalow, and also picked up on worries about the closeness or the proximity of the properties to existing properties there. So I think those have covered those points. Do you want to pick up on any of those, Mr. Pegram?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay, so we'll go into, right, I can see hands, this is good. We'll go into discussion and debate now. The first hand I saw was Councillor Murray, please.
Could I have the definition of affordable, please?
That's a very understandable question. It's one that's asked a lot, because what is affordable? And well, I won't pretend to be the expert on this, so Mr. Pegram will explain that.
Chairman, yes, genuine affordable housing, as far as the Borough Council is concerned, is housing which is either social rented, affordable rent, or is on an intermediate or shared ownership basis. Obviously, Metropolitan Housing Association are a affordable housing provider, and they would provide the affordable housing on that basis. So it would be retained by them for the purpose of meeting that need for social and affordable rent and intermediate housing.
Okay.
There we are, Councillor Murray. So we'll ask you a question next time to see if you remember all that. No, we won't. I'm only joking. Councillor Golan.
You talk a little bit about the overlooking of number 75, Mr. Pegram. It looks quite close on the plans. How close is it in terms of heights and things like that?
I think there is a dimension specified in the report, Chairman. Is that
sorry.
Across the road, yes?
Yeah, that's right. Directly across.
Yes, I think the minimum distance is about 19 metres, I think, if I remember rightly.
I remember reading that. I'm looking for it.
Yeah, overlooking, it's not considered that the proposal would result in unacceptable overlooking in that respect. Clearly, properties facing each other across the road is not an uncommon occurrence, and it's felt that that separation distance in that instance is acceptable.
Thank you.
I haven't found the right. I think it's paragraph 27, 28 in that general area. But is that helpful? Answer helpful? Was it last garden sizes?
Chairman, it's in paragraph 24. The separation.
24, yes, 24.
On the opposite side of Walcott Drive would be approximately 19 metres.
19 metres.
Remembered.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find it again on Google Maps. This is a weird angle, isn't it? Like, I trust it's normal. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Now, I did see another hand, but I'm sorry, I forgot it's Councillor Mason. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think this is a good application. I think it's 100% affordable for affordable homes, which is very good. And this has been happening for a few years now, around and over Rushcliffe. that these garage sites have come forward for a metropolitan. So I'm very pleased and to put forward the recommendation that planning permission is granted, subject to the following conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mason.
Seconded.
Councillor, you even before I asked the question. So Councillor Clark is seconding that. So basically,
I can foretell what you're going to say, Mr.
Yeah, well, I'm so predictable. So, Councillor Mason has moved the recommendation as per the report. Councillor Clark has seconded it, but I'm aware that there are other speakers wishing to speak. So I'm just going to make a note of there who's proposed and seconded. So who was next? Did you have your hand up, Councillor Thomas?
I agree with Councillor Mason about the about this being a good scheme. I just did have one question, and that's how do people get their bins out?
I think I read something about that. Does Mr. Pegram know? The bin. There would have been comment about the.
Do they have to wheel them through each other's gardens, and is that common? That was the question. Really.
Chairman, if you recall, I showed you a photograph of a jitty or a footpath at the rear of the site. Looking at the layout plan, the properties have gated access to that jitty footpath, which then leads round. So I'm trying to be local with my terminology. That path then leads round to Walcott Drive.
So yes, there's a jitty path, call it what you will, Councillor Thomas.
Not a giddle, though.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Who else is speaking on this? Any other hands going up? Anyone wish to speak on this, or shall we go to a decision? Are we happy we've discussed it adequately, given it proper consideration? Right, I think, Mrs. Sells, I think we're ready to go to a decision on this, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the motion to go with officer's recommendation. Alphabetical again, Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Goldland.
For.
Councillor Healy.
For.
Councillor Major.
For.
Councillor Mason.
For.
Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor J. Stockwood.
For.
Councillor M. Stockwood.
For.
Councillor Thomas.
For.
And Councillor Verdi.
For.
It's 11 for unanimous, so the motion carries.
That's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. Right, that's on to our next application now. That was very swift, wasn't it? Well.
Apologies, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Major.
This is in my ward, so do I need to switch my camera off as well? Or
oh yes, sorry, I hadn't twigged that. So yes, if you're a ward member, you need to turn your camera off, and you can't take part in this part
obviously.
of the meeting. Okay,
Yep,
thank you. We'll see you in a bit though for the next items.
Thanks.
Chair, could we have a brief comfort break, please?
Yeah, I think we can actually. So what time is it? It's coming up to 8:10. 5 minutes, is that long enough? So shall we aim for about 8:15? See you in about 5 or 6 minutes. Okay, thank you. Right, I think we're all back, aren't we? I know because Councillor Major is out of the meeting for this one. Right, so here we are, on to the final application for this evening, which is 201 Musters Road, West Bridgeford, proposed demolition of the existing dwelling and to construct a block of 5 apartments. Yes, Mr. Pegram, yes, it's on the screen. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, yes, the application relates to 201 Musters Road. It's a detached bungalow on the corner of Musters Road and Musters Crescent. That's the aerial photograph, again, just confirming the location of the property on the road. Just to pick up while I've got this one on the screen, Chairman, which may be pertinent to your consideration, I think there's concern to suggest that the construction of a block of apartments on this site would be out of keeping with the area. The area is characterised predominantly by single occupancy dwellings. However, these 3 buildings across the road, Chairman, which you'll see in the photographs, are also arranged as apartment blocks. So the other thing I'd make the point, Chairman, is that the photographs are taken at different times and stages. So there's some photographs from the previous application, because now that the hoarding has gone up around the site, it's not easy to get good photographs of the site. So we've done a bit of a mix and match. But the application property in question is behind the hoarding, with the neighbouring property at 203 to the south. That's looking across the road. So you now have 203, the application site at 201, and then the property on the opposite side of Musters Crescent, which is 199. This is a picture taken obviously before the hoarding went up. So that's the relationship with the existing property and the neighbouring property at 203. And then that stood in Musters Crescent, looking at the building and the existing parking provision for the site. That's now just turning around slightly, picking up the Musters Road to the front. One of the buildings across the road, which as I said at the beginning, is arranged as apartment accommodation. And then that's looking across the road, a little bit out of focus, Chairman. I don't think it's my eyes, but that's the property at 199. And then that's the parking area to 199 with the neighbouring property at 1 Musters Crescent. Those are the 3 apartment blocks across the road, which are longer established, obviously. And then that's looking up Musters Road, and you can just see the application site on the left here with the junction of Musters Crescent in the front. Turning around, looking back the other way, so the application site is now on the right in this shot, and the junction of Musters Crescent with Musters Road there. Again, just looking across the front of those properties, and then looking down Musters Crescent, so the application site's on the right. Again, this is an older photograph before the hoarding went up. Looking back the other way, again, before the hoarding went up, but towards Musters Road. And then the northern boundary of the application site. And then stood in the first turning or roundabout area on Musters Crescent. So this is the property to the rear of the site with the application bungalow in that location there. If we then jump inside the site, Chairman, this is obviously just the existing property, which is, I understand it is currently being demolished. But they do have an extant permission on the site, so that is not a breach. It's authorised by the previous permission, but that's the existing property. That's the rear boundary, and I'm advised by the applicant's agent that the close boarded fence is still in position. And again, that's looking at that close boarded fence again with the property to the rear at 22 Musters Crescent. And then that just looks out in a northerly direction. Musters Crescent is beyond that vegetation. So that's the existing property that stands on the site, Chairman, quite a large bungalow. This is a previous permission, which is considered to be a material consideration. So we have previously granted permission for the demolition of the bungalow and 2 detached properties with parking to the front, one accessed from Musters Road, one accessed from Musters Crescent. That permission remains extant and can be implemented. And the proposal before you this evening is to build a block of 5 apartments. The building would, in appearance, have the appearance of a 2-storey property, but obviously has accommodation in the roof, not dissimilar to the property next door, which has been altered to provide accommodation within the roof of that property. I think if I could just pick out, Chairman, in terms of the comparison between the approved scheme and what is before you this evening, one of the properties sits in that position, which I'm edging with the cursor. The other property is in that position. So there would have been or would be a small gap between those properties. The current proposal has a similar massing, albeit in a single block. So the proposal, Chairman, is for 5 2-bedroom apartments arranged over the 3 floors. So 2 on the ground floor with 2 bedrooms, 2 on the first floor with 2 bedrooms, and then a 2-bedroom apartment within the attic space effectively. Proposal would have 3 car parking spaces to the front, accessed off, 4, I should say 4 parking spaces to the front, access off of Musters Road, and 2 parking spaces to the rear off of Musters Crescent. There would be a shared amenity area to the rear here, also a bin store, which has been amended during the process to be large enough to accommodate our recycling to go requirements, and obviously retaining some of the vegetation, or replacing perhaps some of the vegetation along the boundary. Chairman, the site is obviously in a highly sustainable location. It's within the main principal urban area of Rushcliffe. Given the fact it's already occupied by a residential property, there is permission to replace that property with 2 dwellings. It's considered that the principle of residential development or redevelopment on this site is acceptable. The application, therefore, or determination of the application, therefore, really turns on the issues of the scale, appearance, design of the building, the use of the building, and the obviously parking and highway issues, but also impact on the amenities and character of the area and amenities of neighbouring properties. Chairman, all those issues are obviously discussed in the report, so I don't want to go into detail on those issues, but your officers consider that this would be an acceptable proposal. It was originally submitted in this application as 6 apartments and was negotiated to 5, so it's now considered to be an appropriate level of accommodation as well. And on that basis, the application is before you, Chairman, with a recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. And yes, that was clear on the screen. So we have 2 speakers on this item tonight. And the first is Mr. Armstrong, Patrick Armstrong. I think, are you with us? Yes, I think so. So
yes, I'm here.
Thank you for your patience through the other items. I don't know whether you were with us earlier, but you have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. And if you're still talking in 5 minutes, we'd have to ask you to stop. So as soon as you're ready, start if you want to talk.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a long-term resident of Musters Crescent, and I have 36 years experience in highways, planning and transportation departments at Nottinghamshire, Leicester and Nottingham City Councils. I'm here to represent all the residents of Musters Crescent who have very real concern about this application. Despite changes to the application, our many concerns remain, particularly regarding parking. We believe that problems of access and road safety are highly likely to be exacerbated by the proposal for apartments. Parking appears to have been relatively scant regard, I'm afraid, in the planning officer's report, almost wholly reliant on the Highway Authority's comments. Indeed, there's more detail on the location of wheelie bins than there is on parking. The Highway Authority justifies its view that 6 parking spaces is sufficient by reference to census data on cars per 1,000 population for Rushcliffe. I totally refute the relevance of this data. The average for the whole of Rushcliffe is unlikely to apply to this affluent suburb of West Bridgford. The cars per population number includes children. The proposed development is not designed for families with children. It will attract young adults, probably car owning, probably needing to flat share to meet costs, 10 double-bedded rooms, definitely more cars per head than the average. If you need a statistic, then cars per household might be more relevant. For the East Midlands, that is 1.4 cars per household. It's higher locally. For Musters Crescent, it's 1.69. That would require at least 8 spaces for the apartments. Therefore, the presumed expectation of no more than 1.2 cars per apartment could be considered extremely optimistic. Even if 6 spaces were enough, access to them requires very tight turning, particularly when some of those spaces would be already occupied. So on-street becomes more attractive for the residents. The highway comments demonstrate a presumption that on-street parking is only a problem if accidents are actually occurring. That might be a reasonable cost limitation position for an existing situation. But to allow new development with high likelihood of generating on-street parking and the very real potential of creating visibility and access problems without requiring the provision of waiting restrictions is at the very least a lack of forethought and at worst dangerously negligent. It is this high probability of parking close to the junction that is our concern. Musters Crescent is only 4.3 metres wide with narrow footways. Parking vehicles cause blockage and visibility problems when entering or leaving the Crescent. Parking on Musters Road seriously limits visibility. This concern is not imagined despite the photos. We have much experience of problems here, including by the most recent occupant of the bungalow. Very frequent parking, often by more than one vehicle, very close to the junction, blocking the footway, restricting the carriageway, seriously reducing visibility, no consideration of the requirements of the highway code, despite contacts with highways and the police. The occupant was the applicant, someone who you would think would want to minimise any local concerns that would impact on its hopes to the development of the site. Parking near the junction is not just a problem for residents. It can impede refuse vehicles, and more worryingly, it could affect access by emergency vehicles because of the narrowness of the road. It also endangers the many children walking to and from Jessie Gray School. There's little opportunity for further parking away from the junction without blocking drives, so it is not acceptable for the highways to be used for any overspill car parking as suggested by the Highway Authority. To conclude, I accept that the Planning Authority cannot require or implement waiting restrictions on the highway. That does not mean the authority cannot make its own assessment of the likelihood of road safety problems, rather than seemingly relying on the Highway Authority's overly optimistic conclusion, a conclusion which I have demonstrated is based on data which is highly inappropriate for this location and type of accommodation. I trust that the committee will act with full and proper consideration of the safety of its residents and refuse this application for multiple homes with inadequate parking. Please keep it safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Bang on 5 minutes. So thank you for that. And our other speaker on this application is the ward member, and that's Councillor Jones, Rod Jones, please. Good evening to you. Thank you for your patience as well.
Thank you, Chair. The current bungalow would benefit from renovation. There's no doubt about that. However, the reason this is so controversial is it's on a corner plot, and as you've heard, Musters Crescent is particularly narrow. The nearby properties on Musters Road, which have been shown, have a spacious presentation to the street scene. Gardens and off-road parking on all those properties are considerable. The bungalow, in effect, is the first in a line of bungalows on the right-hand side of Musters Crescent. You've been shown the picture of the adjoining bungalow, and you've been shown a ground level image of a fence, but of course the proposed property will be 3-storey and will be massively overlooking and overbearing on that property. The visual effect of the others are complementary because they're all set back. The block of flats that are referred to that are the subject of this application would be on the same footprint as Andrew Pegram has described as the existing approval for 2 houses, crammed in though those would be. The difference, as the officer's report acknowledged, is that there would be a gap between the 2 houses. Therefore, I suggest that the resulting block, by its height and mass, would be over-dominant to the neighbouring bungalow and would affect the street scene. The flats across the road, which again has been referred to and have been shown on the photographs, are far more set back from the road. They've got a grass frontage. And they're only 2-storey, and they're not on the corner of a road. So while some planning application issues are technical, the matters of the character of the area and whether it's overbearing to the neighbouring bungalow are more ones of judgment. Given that this corner plot has frontage on both sides and with houses to the north and south and the bungalow to the east, I suggest that an unbroken mass would not be in keeping with the character of the area and would be overbearing on the bungalow. I do have concerns, which has already been expressed, about the pressure on street parking likely to occur from the residents, but Musters Crescent is very narrow and any restriction of view for entry and exit can be a hazard. I do understand that the County Council Highways have not objected, although conditions concerning curbs, visibility displays, hardbound parking surfaces and closure of access to Musters Crescent are welcome. If this application were to be approved, I obviously think there would be a case for inclusion in the County Council's programme for yellow lining. And if it were to be approved, I would hope that any building up on this site has clear plans to keep these temporary problems to a minimum. And if it were approved, I would ask that a condition be added that a covered bike store be included in addition to the car parking spaces. However, I've continued my objection for the reason that I think it is out of character with the area and over dominant on the adjacent bungalow. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. That was all clear, well within time as well. Right, so we heard from Mr. Armstrong, who is telling us about his background, and he's lived there for 35 years and has a lot of experience with planning and such matters. He's very concerned in particular about the parking and road safety issues, and queries or refutes the relevance of census data. He feels that the occupants of the apartments are likely to be car owners and may well be more occupants than there are building flats because of shared accommodation, for example. And he believes that as a better number of cars, or a more suitable number of car spaces, will be 8 as opposed to 6. Worried about the proximity to junction and visibility concerns as well, and also referred to the nearby Jessie Gray School and children and road safety, and he thinks it's inappropriate data for that location. And Councillor Jones also picked up on the traffic points, but also is worried and concerned about the dominating effect of the proposed building over the neighbouring bungalow, and accepts that there's permission in place for 2 new houses at the moment, but points out that they will be separated and a single building would be not be suitable in keeping with the street scene. And also he explained to us that the existing flats across the road are further from the road. So and then ongoing pressures of street parking, but also he had not accepted that if it's approved tonight, would like to see conditions regarding possible yellow lines and also a covered bike store. So I think that's covered what we've heard. My screen's just moved around. Mr. Pegram, if you could pick up on those, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's nice to meet virtually a colleague, a fellow planner. I think my experience falls just short of Mr. Armstrong at 33 years. Chairman, just in terms of the parking issues and parking demands, the census data will obviously indicate different levels of car ownership across the borough, depending on whether we're in a rural area or in the principal urban area. I think I'm reasonably confident in saying that from dealing with another application in West Bridgford, albeit closer to the centre of West Bridgford, the Highway Authority on that application provided us with census data of around 0.75 or 0.8 car ownership per however measured. The important issue, Chairman, is that the Highway Authority don't object. You'll note from the report that their comments were originally based on 6 flats. It's obviously been reduced to 5 with the same level of parking, and the Highway Authority didn't object to the original scheme for 6 flats. I understand, Mr. Armstrong, and residents' concerns about possible parking on Musters Crescent. It is very narrow as you come off of Musters Road. Human nature, Chairman, I certainly wouldn't park my car on Musters Crescent. I'm looking at a photograph of Musters Road, which is obviously a wider road but more heavily trafficked. If there were an option, I think I would park my car on Musters Road. However, Chairman, that's just anecdotal. The main issue is highway to the application. In terms of the scale and mass of the building, Chairman, you saw the previous approval. I will leave members to draw their own conclusion with regards to the comparison between what's approved on this site and what is currently proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. Right, colleagues, we're now ready to discuss and decide on this application. So who would like to start off with this one, please? Or Councillor Thomas?
Chair, I do understand the concerns about parking. However, I do think to a certain extent it's self-limiting in that people that have a parking requirement are less likely to move into the flats to a certain extent. And I do feel that the officers have dealt with that in the report. I'm supportive of the scheme in general, although I do accept the concerns of residents about overlooking and the parking issues. I don't think those concerns are significant enough to stop the application. I do have 2 things really. I also had a suggestion of a condition for a bicycle store. If people are not parking cars, they may very well have bicycles, and those do cause a lot of friction between residents if people park them in entrance halls and so on. So a secure covered bike park would be a condition that I would request. And the other thing that I'm a bit concerned about is the amenity space. It looks to me as though the amenity garden space could very quickly become apportioned by 2 of the flats that have French windows opening onto them, leaving no amenity space for the other flats. And I would be looking to see if there's some sort of way that that could be safeguarded against by condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, well, there's 2 suggested conditions there. The bike store, I think people will understand what that is, but from a procedural point of view, with regard to amenity space, can we put any conditions in like that somehow protects or ensures the amenity space is available for all the occupants? Is that realistic?
I don't think it's unreasonable, Chairman. The development has to be carried out in accordance with the approved plans. That's one of the requirements. It shows it's an open space. I understand Councillor Thomas's concerns about possible dominance of the use by perhaps the ground floor flats. I don't think necessarily a condition that it shall not be subdivided and shall be retained as a sort of shared amenity space is unreasonable necessarily.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, now, so are there any other hands going up at this point, or are we... Councillor Mason, sorry, I can see you. Yeah, Councillor Mason.
Thank you. I wasn't quite sure. Did Councillor Thomas propose acceptance of the recommendation?
I don't think she has formally proposed it, but I am suspecting that she might be leading to that. But Councillor Thomas, are you in that sort of position?
Yes, I propose that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
In that case, I will second it.
Can I just check
okay.
Conditions.
Yes, and the conditions. Now we just need to go back to Councillor Thomas and indeed Councillor Mason, your conditions. So Councillor Thomas, you just want to confirm that, please, with Mr. Pegram.
2 two conditions suitably worded by Mr. Pegram. One about a cycle store being provided with access for all the residents, secure and covered, and the other to do with protecting the use of the amenity space by all residents or residents of all the flats for the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. And you agree with that, do you, Councillor Mason?
Yes, if it is reasonable to expect a cycle storage facility and that there is room, then yes.
Do we need to, Mr. Pegram, do we need to look at the plans about that cycle store? I mean, how do we do that in reality?
Bear with me, Chairman. My suggestion, Chairman, would be, where am I going? I need to share my screen with you. My suggestion would be a condition worded along the lines of, prior to any of the apartments being occupied, details of a secure covered cycle store shall be submitted to and approved by the Borough Council, and the cycle store shall be provided. Oh, I do apologise, I've lost it.
Oh, that's nice.
Bear with me, Chairman.
We suddenly had a boundary change.
That's a hell of a cycle store.
Do apologise, Bay. I clicked on the wrong thing. Right. We'll get there. I do apologise.
I'm sure. I've got every confidence.
Oh yes, it requires details to be agreed before occupation, or agreed and provided before occupation. I mean, clearly, I will state the obvious. Depending on where it goes, it may reduce the size of the amenity area. There is actually a very generous area here, which could be cut back a little bit. Potentially, you could put a cycle store in there. You could put a cycle store down the back. But again, the details of the type, appearance, and location, I'm satisfied could be secured by condition.
That's a very helpful plan. Yes, thank you for that. Councillor Thomas, are you happy with that? Okay, thank you. Right, so back to the meeting. Does anyone else wish to say anything or ask anything, or shall we make a decision? Oh, Councillor Clark.
Only just very briefly, Chairman. I'm assuming that included, I totally agree with what Mr. Pegram has just suggested, but maybe it might need a slight adjustment of the bin store in order to in terms of turning it around or laying it out or whatever, to integrate the cycle store in with it. So I would be happy with that, as long as we give the latitude that maybe the layout of the bin store just changes slightly to accommodate the cycle store.
I think that's okay. Mr. Pegram, have you got that?
Chairman, at the time we wrote the report, we didn't have, or we still don't have, the full details of the bin store. You would in fact see that there's a similar condition proposed requiring final final design and appearance of the bin store to be provided as well. I can't locate it at this moment.
Yeah,
there is a condition that requires the bin store to be agreed as well.
Yeah, I'm just looking through it.
Condition 8, Chairman.
Oh yes. So
it'd be a similar condition for.
Yeah. Yes, the store shall be. Yes, so that can be altered amended accordingly.
Well, that would be a separate condition, and if they choose to come in with a joint facility, we can consider that on both counts.
Right, got it. So it will be covered. Yeah. Right. With that, then, you're happy with that, Councillor Clark? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak, or shall we go to a decision? I think we're probably ready to go to a decision on this. I think we've covered the points that were raised by our speakers. So, Mrs. Sells, please.
Yeah, so this is to go with officer recommendation with those two additional conditions in alphabetical order. Councillor Butler.
4.
Councillor Clark.
4.
Councillor Gowland.
4.
Councillor Healy.
4.
Councillor Major. Oh, sorry, not Councillor Major. Councillor Mason.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
4.
Councillor J Stockwood.
4.
Councillor M Stockwood.
4.
Councillor Thomas. And Councillor Birdie.
4.
That's unanimous for those who are here. It's 10-4, so the motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. And so permission is granted with those additional conditions. Right, Councillor Major can rejoin us. Yeah, oh, there you are. Okay, so right, that's the final application for tonight. The next item is really to just note, or if anyone has any questions on recent appeals, which we have in front of us. Does anyone have any questions or comments on those? No. No. Okay. So what do we do with those? Just note them, I think.
No, Chairman.
Yeah. So those are noted. Right. So that's the final item on the agenda. So we've proceeded quite well this evening, I think. We had very important applications, decisions to take, and I think we've got through those. Can I thank you all for your contributions, and thank our guests for their patience in sitting through items that weren't necessarily of interest to them. So we'll bring the meeting to a close. I think it's, what shall we say, 2047. And stay safe, everyone, and we look forward to the next meeting in December. Okay, so unless anyone else has anything else to say, we'll say good night. So thank you.